In a quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a stranger named Clara arrives, stirring up old secrets with a locket and a dangerous truth. When she's poisoned and another murder follows, Miss Jane Marple, the sharp-eyed old lady, unravels a web of lies tied to a heartbreak from her past. Anonymous letters taunt the village, but Miss Marple's secret promise kept for decades holds the key. With clever traps and quiet questions, she catches a desperate killer, brings justice, and heals old wounds, proving no secret stays buried forever. Chapter 1. The Quiet of St. Mary Mead. The sun hung low over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft gold. Cottages with neat gardens lined the narrow lanes, their roses nodding in the warm breeze. It was a sleepy place, where everyone knew everyone else's business or thought they did. Miss Jane Marple sat by her window, her knitting needles clicking like a steady heartbeat. Her sharp blue eyes, hidden behind gentle wrinkles, watched the world outside. She loved this time of day, when the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. And something did. A stranger arrived. Clara Henshaw stepped off the afternoon bus, her red coat bright against the dusty road. She carried a small suitcase and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Villagers peeked from behind curtains as she walked toward Rose Cottage, the little house she'd rented at the edge of town. Mrs. Price, the postmistress, whispered to her friend at the shop, "She's too fancy for St. Mary Mead. Look at that hat. Who does she think she is?" Miss Marple watched Clara pass by, her fingers pausing over her knitting. There was something about the young woman, her quick steps, the way she glanced over her shoulder, that stirred a memory. Clara's dark hair and sharp cheekbones reminded Miss Marple of someone from long ago, a friend from her youth named Eleanor. But Eleanor was gone, lost to a sad story Miss Marple kept locked in her heart. She shook her head and went back to her knitting, but her mind stayed busy. That evening, the village hall buzzed with chatter. Mrs. Bantry, a kind but nosy widow, had planned a tea party to welcome Clara. The hall smelled of fresh scones and strong tea. Villagers crowded around tables, their voices mixing with the clink of cups. Miss Marple sat in a corner, her shawl draped over her shoulders, watching everyone. She didn't need to talk much. People always forgot she was there, and that's how she learned things. Aunt Clara stood near the center of the room, laughing with Dr. Haydock, the village doctor. Her red dress matched her coat, and her voice carried a hint of a city accent. "Oh, St. Mary Mead is charming," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But I bet it hides a few secrets, doesn't it?" Dr. Haydock chuckled, but his smile was tight. "Not much happens here, Miss Henshaw. Just quiet folk living quiet lives." Miss Marple's needles clicked faster. Clara's words felt like a challenge, not a joke. She noticed Laura Ashford, a shy young woman from the big house up the hill, staring at Clara with wide eyes. Laura's brother Thomas stood nearby, his hands in his pockets, looking bored. Then there was Mr. Langley, a slick publisher, visiting from London to meet Miss Marple's nephew, Raymond West. He hovered near Clara, offering her more tea and talking too loudly about his fancy office. "Miss Henshaw, you must tell me about yourself," Mr. Langley said, leaning close. "What brings a city girl to our little village?" Clara's smile flickered. "Oh, just looking for a change. And maybe to find someone I've heard about." Her eyes darted to Miss Marple for a moment, so quick most would miss it. But Miss Marple didn't dawdle. As the party ended, Clara slipped out early, saying she was tired. Miss Marple watched her go, her mind turning over that glance. Did Clara know her? Or was it about someone else? She thought of Eleanor again, the friend who'd vanished after a heartbreak in Italy, where Miss Marple had studied as a young woman. Eleanor's face, so like Clara's, haunted her. But she pushed the thought away. Memories could trick you, and Miss Marple trusted facts. The next morning, the village woke to a scream. It came from Rose Cottage. Mrs. Price, delivering the post, had found Clara on her kitchen floor, her face pale and still. A teacup lay shattered beside her, its contents spilled across the tiles. By noon, the news spread. Clara Henshaw was dead. Inspector Craddock arrived by lunchtime, his notebook already full. He was a sturdy man with kind eyes, but a sharp mind, and he liked Miss Marple's help, even if he didn't always admit it. He stood in Rose Cottage's small kitchen, where Clara's body had been taken away. The air smelled faintly of bitter almonds. A clue Miss Marple tucked away in her mind. "Looks like suicide," Craddock said, scratching his chin. "The doctor says poison cyanide, maybe. She drank it in her tea last night." No signs of a struggle. Miss Marple stood by the window, her hands folded. "Suicide, Inspector. That's one way to see it, but Clara didn't strike me as someone ready to give up." Craddock raised an eyebrow. "You met her for an hour, Miss Marple. What makes you so sure?" She smiled, her eyes soft but sharp. "Oh, just a feeling. Young women like Clara come to places like St. Mary Mead for a reason, and that reason usually involves someone else." Craddock sighed. "Well, we'll check her things. Maybe she left a note." They searched the cottage. Clara's suitcase held only clothes and a few books, nothing unusual. But in her desk drawer, Miss Marple found a small locket tucked under some papers. She opened it carefully, revealing a tiny photo of a young man with dark hair and a serious face. He looked like someone from the Ashford family, maybe Laura, or Thomas's father. Miss Marple slipped the locket back, saying nothing. She didn't want to stir up trouble yet, as Craddock questioned the villagers. Stories poured out. Mrs. Bantry said Clara had visited her the day before, asking odd questions about old families in St. Mary Mead. She wanted to know about the Ashfords, Mrs. Bantry whispered. "Something about a scandal years ago. I told her we don't talk about such things." Dr. Haydock admitted he'd argued with Clara at the party. "She was pushy," he said, his face red. "Kept asking about my father, of all people. I told her to mind her own business." Laura Ashford, pale and quiet, said she'd only met Clara once, but her hand shook when she spoke. Thomas Ashford shrugged and said he barely noticed Clara. Mr. Langley, though, was eager to talk. "She was charming," he said, "but secretive. Kept saying she was here to settle something. I thought she was joking." Miss Marple listened to it all, her face calm but her mind racing. That evening, she sat by her fire, knitting, a soft pink scarf. A letter had arrived in the afternoon post, slipped under her door. It was from Clara, written in neat, slanted handwriting. "Dear Miss Marple, I know who you are. I know about Italy, and Eleanor, and what happened. Meet me tomorrow, and I'll tell you why I'm here." It's time the truth came out. Clara Miss Marple folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. Her heart beat faster, but her face stayed still. Eleanor's name brought back memories. She'd buried deep memories of a summer in Italy. A friend betrayed, and a secret Miss Marple had promised to keep. Had Clara known that secret, and had it gotten her killed? She thought of the bitter almond smell in the cottage. Cyanide wasn't easy to come by, not in a village like this. Someone had planned Clara's death, someone who knew her purpose. Miss Marple's needles clicked as she pictured the tea party against Clara's sharp eyes, Laura's trembling hands, Dr. Haydock's tight smile. They all had secrets, she was sure. But so did she. The village clock struck 9, its chime drifting through the quiet night. Miss Marple set her knitting down and looked out her window. St. Mary Mead seemed peaceful, but she knew better. Trouble was brewing, and Clara's death was just the start. She wouldn't tell Craddock about the letter, not yet. She needed to be sure of who Clara was, what she wanted, and why someone wanted her gone. As she blew out her candle and climbed the stairs to bed, Miss Marple made a promise to herself. She'd find the truth, no matter how deep it was, buried, and she'd keep her own secret safe until the time was right. The village might think her just a nosy old lady, but they didn't know the strength in her quiet heart, or the memories she carried, sharp as a knife. Tomorrow, she'd start asking questions. Not loud ones, but the kind that slipped under the skin, the kind that made people talk without meaning to. Clara deserved that much. And maybe, just maybe, Eleanor's ghost would finally rest. Chapter 2. Whispers of Scandal. The morning after Clara Henshaw's death, St. Mary Mead buzzed like a beehive. Villagers gathered in small knots outside the post office and the bakery, their voices low but eager. The news of poison in Rose Cottage had spread faster than the morning mist. Miss Jane Marple sat in her garden, pruning her roses, but her ears caught every whisper that drifted over the hedge. She didn't need to join the chatter to know what people were saying. Gossip was the village's lifeblood, and today it ran thick. Mrs. Price, the postmistress, stood by her shop, hands on her hips, poison in her tea. She told a cluster of women, "Cyanide, they say. Who even gets that around here?" Clara Henshaw wasn't the type to end her own life. Mark my words. Her friend, Miss Hartnell, nodded, her hat bobbing. She was too bold, that one, asking questions at the tea party, stirring up trouble. I saw her talking to Dr. Haydock, and he looked cross as anything. Miss Marple snipped a wilted rose, her face calm but her mind sharp. Clara's letter, tucked in her apron pocket, weighed heavy. "I know about Italy and Eleanor," it had said. Miss Marple hadn't slept much, thinking of Eleanor, her friend from long ago, with dark hair like Clara's, and a laugh that hid her pain. Eleanor's story ended in Italy, betrayed by a man she loved. Miss Marple had promised to keep it secret, but now Clara's death made her wonder, was Clara here to dig up that old pain? And had someone stopped her? Inspector Craddock arrived at Miss Marple's cottage just past 10, his hat in hand. "Morning, Miss Marple," he said, stepping into her tidy parlor. "I hope I'm not interrupting your roses." "Not at all, Inspector," she replied, offering him a chair. Her knitting lay on the table, a soft pink scarf growing longer. "Any news about poor Clara?" Craddock sighed, flipping open his notebook. "Not much. The doctor confirmed cyanide in her system, quick and nasty. We found no bottle or packet in the cottage, so it's looking less like suicide. But who'd want her dead? She'd only been here 2 days." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. 2 days is enough to make enemies, Inspector, if you ask the right questions or the wrong ones. He raised an eyebrow. "You think she was poking into something dangerous?" "People don't come to St. Mary Mead by accident," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Clara was looking for someone, or something. Did you find anything in her papers?" Craddock shook his head. "Just bills and a diary with no names, only dates. She wrote about meeting an old friend's shadow here. Odd phrase. Mean anything to you?" Miss Marple's hands stilled on her knitting. An old friend's shadow. It sounded like Eleanor, but she couldn't be sure. "Not yet," she said, smiling. "But villages are full of shadows, aren't they?" Craddock chuckled. "You're dodging me, Miss Marple. If you've got a hunch, I'd like to hear it." "Oh, I'm just an old lady with too much time to think," she said, but her mind was racing. She wouldn't tell him about the letter, not until she knew more. Clara's words felt personal, like a thread tied to her own past. She needed to tug it carefully. After Craddock left, Miss Marple put on her best hat and walked to the village square. The sun was high now, and the air smelled of fresh bread from the bakery. She stopped by Mrs. Bantry's house, a big stone place with ivy climbing the walls. Mrs. Bantry was in her garden, weeding with fierce energy. "Jane," she called, waving a muddy trowel. "Terrible business about Clara, isn't it? I can't stop thinking about her. So young, so pretty. Why would anyone hurt her?" Miss Marple sat on a garden bench, her hands folded. "She was curious, wasn't she? You said she asked about old families." Mrs. Bantry nodded, brushing dirt from her gloves. "Oh yes, she came here the day before the tea party, all smiles, but her questions were sharp. Wanted to know about the Ashfords, especially their father, old Mr. Ashford. I told her he died years ago, but she kept on about scandals, said she'd heard a story about a woman who left the village in shame." Miss Marple's heart skipped. A woman who left in shame. Eleanor's story echoed in her mind. Betrayed, heartbroken, gone from Italy without a word. Could Clara have known? Did she say where she heard this story? Miss Marple asked. No, but she had a look in her eye, like she knew more than she let on. Mrs. Bantry leaned closer. "Do you think she was after the Ashfords, Laura's? So quiet, but Thomas, well, he's got a temper." Miss Marple nodded. storing the thought. She remembered Laura's shaking hands at the tea party, Thomas's bored stare, the locket in Clara's cottage, with its photo of a man like old Mr. Ashford, flashed in her mind. Was it him or someone else? Her next stop was the vicarage, where the vicar's wife, Mrs. Clement, was setting out scones for a charity meeting. Miss Marple joined her, offering to help. As they arranged plates, she steered the talk to Clara. Such a shock, Mrs. Clement said, her round face pale. I saw Clara arguing with Dr. Haydock at the tea party. She was so pushy, asking about his father. Poor Dr. Haydock looked ready to bolt. Miss Marple poured tea, her movements slow. His father, that's odd. Dr. Haydock's father was a doctor too, wasn't he? Yes, but he left St. Mary Mead years ago, after some trouble. Nobody talks about it. Mrs. Clement lowered her voice. Clara seemed to know something. She said, secrets don't stay buried forever. I heard her, myself. Miss Marple's needles clicked in her bag. A habit when she was thinking. Dr. Haydock's father had been a handsome man, charming but reckless. She remembered him from her younger days, before he left under a cloud. Could Clara's questions have stirred up that old trouble? And why had she looked at Miss Marple so strangely? As she left the vicarage, Miss Marple passed the Ashford estate. Its tall gate stood open, and she glimpsed Laura Ashford in the garden, clipping roses. Laura looked up, her face pale, and dropped her shears. Miss Marple waved, but Laura hurried inside, skittish as a mouse. Miss Marple murmured. She thought of the locket again. If it held old Mr. Ashford's picture, why did Clara have it? And why was Laura so nervous? That afternoon, Miss Marple visited the village shop, where Mr. Langley, the publisher, was buying cigarettes. He grinned when he saw her. Miss Marple, heard you're helping Craddock with this awful business. Any theories? She smiled, her eyes sharp. Oh, I leave theories to the police, Mr. Langley. But Clara did seem curious. Did she talk to you much? He laughed, but it sounded forced. She was a charmer. Kept asking about my work, my travels. Said she was writing a story herself. Something about old secrets. I thought she was flirting, but maybe not. Miss Marple nodded, filing that away. A story about secrets. Clara's diary had mentioned an old friend's shadow. Was she writing about Eleanor, or someone else's past? Back at her cottage, Miss Marple sat by her fire, the letter from Clara in her hands. She read it again, her fingers tracing the words. I know about Italy, and Eleanor. She closed her eyes, picturing Eleanor's face, her smile, her tears. The man who broke her heart. That man had been Dr. Haydock's father. She was almost sure. Had Clara known him too? Or was she chasing his shadow, looking for proof of his betrayal? The village clock struck 6, its chimes soft in the evening air. Miss Marple tucked the letter away and picked up her knitting. The village was full of whispers about Clara, the Ashfords, Dr. Haydock, even old scandals. She thought of Laura's trembling hands, Thomas's cold stare, Dr. Haydock's red face. Someone had given Clara that poison, and someone knew why. She wouldn't tell Craddock about the letter yet. It was her secret, tied to a promise she'd made long ago. But promises could bend when lives were at stake. Clara's death wasn't the end. It was the start of something bigger. Something that reached back to Italy and forward to St. Mary Mead's quiet lanes. As the fire crackled, Miss Marple made a plan. She'd visit the Ashfords tomorrow. Maybe drop by Dr. Haydock's office. She'd ask her gentle questions, the kind that made people talk without thinking. And she'd watch, as she always did, for the truth hiding in plain sight. The roses outside her window swayed in the breeze, there, petals falling like secrets. Miss Marple smiled. She'd find the truth, one stitch at a time. Chapter 3. The shadow of the past. The sun climbed high over St. Mary Mead, its light spilling across the village's tidy gardens and stone walls. But the warmth couldn't chase away the chill of Clara Henshaw's death. The village hummed with nervous energy, as if everyone felt eyes watching them. Miss Jane Marple sat in her parlor, her knitting needles clicking softly. Her sharp blue eyes flicked to the letter from Clara, still hidden in her apron pocket. I know about Italy, and Eleanor, it had said. Those words tugged at a memory Miss Marple had buried deep a summer long ago. A friend betrayed, a promise to stay silent. Clara's death had pulled that memory loose, and now it wouldn't let go. She thought of Eleanor's face, so like Clara's, with dark hair and sharp cheekbones. Eleanor had loved a man in Italy, a charming doctor who broke her heart. That man, Miss Marple was almost sure, was Dr. Haydock's father. Had Clara known him, was she here to stir up that old pain? Miss Marple set her knitting down. She needed answers, and the Ashford estate was the place to start. The Ashford house sat on a hill, its tall windows glinting like watchful eyes. Miss Marple walked up the gravel path, her straw hat shielding her from the sun. She carried a basket of apples from her garden, a perfect excuse for a visit. Laura Ashford answered the door, her face pale and her eyes red, as if she hadn't slept. "Miss Marple," Laura said, her voice shaky. "What a surprise. Come in, please." The parlor was grand but cold, with heavy curtains and old portraits on the walls. Laura offered tea, her hands fumbling with the pot. Miss Marple watched her closely, noting the way she avoided eye contact. "I thought you might like some apples," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle. "And I wanted to see how you're holding up, with all this talk about poor Clara." Laura's cup rattled in its saucer. "It's awful," she whispered. "I didn't know her well, but it's so sad." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes soft but sharp. "She was curious, wasn't she? Asking about your family, I hear." Laura's face went paler. "She came by once, asking about father. I told her he's been gone for years. I don't know why she cared." Miss Marple sipped her tea, thinking of the locket in Clara's cottage. The photo inside looked like old Mr. Ashford, Laura's father. "Families do have stories," she said. "Some we'd rather forget." "Did Clara mention anyone else? A woman, maybe, from long ago?" Laura shook her head quickly. "No, nothing like that. She just asked odd questions." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I'm sorry, I have to check the oven." As Laura hurried out, Miss Marple's gaze fell on a photo on the mantel, a young man in a suit, smiling stiffly. He matched the face in Clara's locket. Old Mr. Ashford, no doubt, but why did Clara have his picture? And why was Laura so nervous? Back in the village, Miss Marple stopped by the church, where Mrs. Bantry was arranging flowers for Sunday service. The air smelled of lilies and wax, and the pews creaked under Mrs. Bantry's bustling steps. "Jane, you're everywhere today," Mrs. Bantry said, pinning a rose to a wreath. "Still thinking about Clara?" "Hard not to," Miss Marple replied, adjusting her hat. She left quite a stir. "Did you ever hear of a woman named Eleanor, from years back? Connected to the Ashfords, maybe?" Mrs. Bantry frowned, her hands pausing. "Eleanor doesn't ring a bell. But old Mr. Ashford was a charmer, you know. Broke a few hearts before he married. There was talk of a girl who left town suddenly, but that was before my time." Miss Marple's heart quickened. A girl who left suddenly. It fit Eleanor's story too well. She kept her face calm, but her mind spun. Had Clara been chasing that old scandal? Was she Eleanor's kin, come to dig up the past? That afternoon, Inspector Craddock called at Miss Marple's cottage. He looked tired, his notebook thicker with notes. "We've got a new lead," he said, sitting heavily. "Clara's diary had a name scratched out, but we made it out mean anything to you." Miss Marple's fingers tightened on her knitting. "Eleanor's a common name," she said lightly. "Could be anyone." Craddock eyed her. "You're holding back, Miss Marple. I can tell. If you know something, spill it." She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Just old stories, Inspector. Nothing solid." "What else did the diary say?" He sighed. "Not much. She wrote about meeting someone here to settle an old debt. And there was a note about a locket. Something about it proving the truth. Did you see it when we searched the cottage?" Miss Marple nodded. "A locket, yes. With a photo inside. It looked like Mr. Ashford, the old one." Craddock's eyes widened. "Why didn't you say so?" "That's a lead. I thought it was." "Nothing," she said, her voice soft. "Old photos can mean anything. but she knew better. The locket tied Clara to the Ashfords, and maybe to Eleanor. She wouldn't tell Craddock about her own connection, not yet. Her promise to Eleanor held her back, like a knot she couldn't untie. As Craddock left, Miss Marple walked to Dr. Haydock's office. The waiting room was empty, and the nurse let her in. Dr. Haydock sat at his desk, his face lined and tired. He stood when he saw her, forcing a smile. "Miss Marple, what brings you here? Not feeling poorly, I hope." "Oh, I'm fine," she said, sitting across from him. "Just thinking about Clara. She asked you about your father, didn't she?" His smile faded. "She did. Nosy girl. Wanted to know about his time in the village. I told her he left years ago, and that's that." Miss Marple tilted her head. She seemed to think there was more to it. Something about a woman, perhaps. Dr. Haydock's face reddened. She was fishing for gossip. "My father was a good man, but he had his troubles. No need to drag them up now." He stood, signaling the visit was over. Miss Marple thanked him and left, her mind busy. Dr. Haydock's father had been in Italy the same summer as Eleanor. She remembered. A charming man, but cruel when it suited him. Had he been the one to break Eleanor's heart? And had Clara come to expose him? That evening, the village hall hosted a knitting circle, a chance for Miss Marple to listen. The women's voices filled the room, their needles clicking like a chorus. Miss Hartnell leaned close to Mrs. Price, her voice low. "I heard Clara was seen near the Ashford estate the night she died. Laura was out walking, too. Funny, isn't it?" Mrs. Price nodded, and Mr. Langley was at the pub, asking about Clara. Said she owed him money. Sounds like she had linen was trouble, that one. Miss Marple's needles moved steadily, but her ears caught every word. Laura near the cottage, Langley chasing debts. The pieces were piling up, but they didn't fit yet. She thought of Clara's letter, Againly, and Eleanor. It was the key, she was sure, but she needed more. As she walked home, the stars glittered above St. Mary Mead. The village was quiet, but danger hid in its shadows. Miss Marple clutched her shawl, thinking of the locket, the diary, the bitter, almond smell of cyanide. Someone had planned Clara's death carefully. Someone who knew her secret hand, maybe Miss Marple's in her cottage. She lit a candle and read Clara's letter again. It's time the truth came out. Miss Marple's heart ached for Eleanor, for Clara, for the pain of old secrets. She wouldn't tell Craddock yet, not until she was sure. But tomorrow, she'd visit Mr. Langley. His talk of debts and stories felt like a loose thread, and Miss Marple was good at pulling threads. She blew out the candle and climbed the stairs, her mind alive with questions. The truth was close, hiding in the village's quiet corners, and Miss Marple would find it, one careful step at a time. Chapter 4. The village web. The morning mist hung low over St. Mary Mead, wrapping the village in a soft gray shawl. Cottages peeked through the haze, their windows glowing like sleepy eyes. Miss Jane Marple stood at her gate, her scarf tucked tight against the chill. Clara Henshaw's death had stirred the village like a stone dropped in a pond, and the ripples were growing. Miss Marple's fingers brushed the letter in her pocket. Clara's words about Italy and Eleanor. That secret, tied to a long-ago promise, weighed heavier each day. She couldn't share it yet, not until she understood why Clara had come and who had silenced her. The village was alive with whispers. At the bakery, Miss Marple overheard Mrs. Price telling a customer about a strange letter found in the post office. Addressed to no one, but marked with a single word. Truth. "It's got to be about Clara," Mrs. Price said, her eyes wide. "Someone's stirring trouble." Miss Marple's ears pricked up. Anonymous letters were like poison. They spread fear and pointed fingers. She wondered who sent it and why. Her first stop was the village pub, where Mr. Langley, the London publisher, was staying. The pub smelled of stale beer and wood smoke, its low ceiling heavy with old beams. Mr. Langley sat by the fire, reading a newspaper, his slick hair catching the light. He looked up as Miss Marple approached, his smile too wide. "Miss Marple, joining me for a pint," he joked, folding the paper. She smiled, settling into a chair. "Oh, I'll stick to tea, Mr. Langley. I wanted to chat about Clara. You said she owed you money." His smile faltered. "Did I? Well, just a figure of speech. She was interested in my publishing business. You know, said she had a story too. Sell something about old secrets." I thought she was teasing, but she seemed serious. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened behind her gentle gaze. "A story about secrets. Did she mention names? The Ashfords, perhaps? Or Dr. Haydock's family?" Langley shifted in his seat. "Not exactly. She talked about a woman wronged years ago. Said she had proof a locket. I think I told her. It sounded like a good tale, but she got quiet after that." Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. The locket again, with its photo of old Mr. Ashford. Clara's diary had mentioned it, proving the truth. Was her story about Eleanor, betrayed by Dr. Haydock's father? And had Langley seen more than he let on? "You were at the pub the night she died," she said softly. "Did you see anyone near her cottage?" He shrugged, too quickly. "I was here, drinking. Didn't see a thing." "Why? You think I'm mixed up in this?" "Oh, I don't think anything," Miss Marple said, her voice sweet. "I just listened." But as she left, she noted his nervous hands. Langley was hiding something, she was sure. Next, Miss Marple walked to the village green, where children played and women chatted. Miss Hartnell stood by the well, her hat askew, talking to Mrs. Clement. "I saw Laura Ashford near Rose Cottage that night," Miss Hartnell said, her voice sharp, skulking about, looking guilty. "And now these letters. Someone knows something." Mrs. Clement frowned. "Letters? What letters?" Miss Marple stepped closer, her basket swinging. "Good morning, ladies. Talking about Clara." Miss Hartnell turned, eager to share. "Oh, Miss Marple, it's dreadful. Anonymous letters are going around, saying things like the truth will out and secrets kill. I got one this morning, slipped under my door." Miss Marple's heart quickened. Anonymous letters were a coward's weapon, meant to scare or distract. "Did you show it to Inspector Craddock?" she asked. "Not yet," Miss Hartnell said, "but I will. It's got to be about Clara. She was poking into everyone's business. Laura, Dr. Haydock, even you, Miss Marple, me." Miss Marple's voice was calm, but her mind raced. Had Clara told someone about her letter? Or was this a guess? "Well, I'm just an old lady. Nothing to hide." But Eleanor's face flashed in her mind. Her friend, betrayed in Italy, maybe by Dr. Haydock's father, maybe tied to the Ashfords. She kept that secret close, like a card held tight to her chest. At noon, Miss Marple visited Inspector Craddock at the police station, a small room smelling of ink and coffee. He was sorting papers, his face tired. "Miss Marple, you're a busy bee today," he said, offering a chair. "Heard about these letters?" She nodded. "Nasty things. They make people nervous, which is likely the point. Any luck with Clara's diary?" Craddock rubbed his eyes. "We found a new page. She wrote about meeting someone at the tea party who knew the truth but wouldn't talk. No name, of course. And she mentioned a book, a journal, maybe that held the real story. We didn't find it in her cottage." Chapter 5. A tangled thread. The sun rose over St. Mary Mead, but its light felt cold, as if the village knew more trouble was coming. Miss Jane Marple sat by her window, her knitting needles quiet in her lap. Clara Henshaw's death had shaken the village, and the anonymous letters' sharp words, like "truth kills and no one escapes," had everyone on edge. Miss Marple's fingers brushed a letter in her pocket, Clara's words about Italy, and Eleanor burning in her mind. That secret, a promise to a friend betrayed long ago, felt heavier each day. Clara had known something, and someone had stopped her with poison. Now, Miss Marple was sure that someone wasn't done. The village buzzed with fear. At the post office, Mrs. Price whispered to customers about the latest letter found on the church steps, saying, "The past catches up." Miss Marple listened from the counter, buying stamps she didn't need. The letters were like wasps, stinging everyone with doubt. Were they from Clara's killer, taunting the village, or someone else, stirring the pot? She thought of Eleanor, her friend from Italy, whose heartbreak tied to Dr. Haydock's father. Was Clara her kin, come to dig up that old wound? Miss Marple's heart ached, but she kept her face calm. That morning, She walked to the village hall, where Inspector Craddock was meeting with locals. His face was grim, his notebook thick with scribbles. Another letter turned up, he told her, holding up a crumpled note. Same handwriting, same nonsense about truth. It's got people scared, Miss Marple. She nodded, her eyes sharp, behind her soft smile. Fear makes people talk, Inspector. Sometimes too much, sometimes not enough. Craddock sighed. Clara's diary mentioned a journal with a real story. We still haven't found it, and that locket told Mr. Ashford's photo inside points to the Ashfords, but Laura and Thomas swear they barely knew Clara. Miss Marple's mind turned to the locket, its worn edges clear in her memory. Old Mr. Ashford's face, young and stern, matched the man in her past, tied to Eleanor's pain. She hadn't told Craddock about Clara's letter to her, not yet. Her promise to Eleanor held her back. Like a locked door she wasn't ready to open. Before she could reply, a shout came from outside. A boy ran in, his face white. "It's Mr. Langley. He's dead." The village froze. Miss Marple followed Craddock to the pub, where Mr. Langley's room was now a crime scene. The publisher lay on the floor, a knife in his chest, blood pooling on the rug. A note was pinned to his shirt, secrets cut deep. The air smelled of iron and fear. Craddock knelt by the body, his jaw tight. "This isn't random," he said. "Same killer as Clara, I'd bet." Miss Marple's eyes scanned the room. Langley's suitcase was open, papers scattered. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat on the table, untouched. She noticed a scrap of paper under the bed, its edge torn. She bent, pretending to adjust her shoe, and slipped it into her sleeve. It was a risk, but her gut told her it mattered. Back at her cottage, she read the scrap by candlelight. It was in Clara's handwriting. "The journal is hidden where roses grow." Miss Marple's heart raced. Roses meant Rose Cottage, Clara's home. Had she hidden the journal there? And had Langley known about it? His talk of debts and stories made him a target, but for whom? She thought of the suspects. Laura Ashford, pale and shaky, seen near Clara's cottage. Thomas Ashford, cold and quiet, tied to Langley through money troubles. Dr. Haydock, red-faced, when Clara asked about his father. Each had a reason to want Clara gone, and now Langley. Miss Marple's secret to Eleanor's betrayal by Dr. Haydock. Father felt closer to the truth. Was Clara Eleanor's granddaughter, come to expose that old shame? The next day, Miss Marple visited Rose Cottage, now empty and sealed by police tape. She slipped inside, claiming she'd left a scarf. The kitchen still smelled faintly of bitter almonds, a ghost of Clara's death. Miss Marple checked the garden, where roses climbed the fence. She dug carefully, her fingers brushing dirt, and found a small metal box buried under the roots. Inside was a leather journal, its pages worn but neat. Clara's writing filled the pages. "I found her story in grandmother's letters. Eleanor loved a man who lied, a Dr. Haydock's father. He left her broken, and the Ashfords hid it. The locket proves it. I'll make them face the truth." Miss Marple's breath caught. Clara was Eleanor's kin, chasing justice. The journal named Dr. Haydock's father and hinted at a child Eleanor's lost to time. Was that child Laura or Thomas's parent? Miss Marple tucked the journal into her basket, her mind spinning. Clara's quest had cost her life, and now Langley's. The killer was tying up loose ends, and the anonymous letters were their taunt. She thought of Laura's trembling hands, Thomas's debts, Dr. Haydock's anger. Someone knew Clara's plan and feared her proof. That afternoon, she met Mrs. Bantry at the vicarage, where tea was served with nervous chatter. "Another death," Mrs. Bantry said, her hands shaking. Langley was nosy, always asking about Clara. Did he know too much? Miss Marple sipped her tea, her face calm. He was curious, like Clara. Curiosity can be dangerous. She steered the talk to the Ashfords. "Laura's been quiet lately, and Thomas seen trouble with him." Mrs. Bantry leaned close. "Thomas owed Langley money. You know, gambling debts, I hear. And Laura's been jumpy since Clara came. Those letters aren't helping." Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. Thomas's debts made him desperate. Laura's fear made her guilty. and Dr. Haydock's past tied him to Eleanor. The journal was the key, but Miss Marple wouldn't show it yet. Her promise to Eleanor, and her need to be sure, kept it hidden. At the village shop, Miss Hartnell was buying flour, her voice loud. Another letter came today, pushed under my gate, said, "The knife cuts both ways. It's that killer, mocking us." Miss Marple's heart sank. The letters were a game, meant to scare and confuse. Were they from Dr. Haydock, protecting his father's name, Thomas, covering his debts, or Laura, hiding a family shame? She thought of the journal, safe in her cottage. It held the truth, but the truth was dangerous. That evening, Craddock stopped by, his face drawn. "We found a knife in Langley's room, wiped clean, no prints. And a witness saw Thomas Ashford near the pub that night. He's not talking." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "Thomas is a troubled boy. But trouble doesn't always mean guilt." "What about Dr. Haydock?" Craddock frowned. "He's got an alibi patients all evening. But he's nervous. Keeps saying Clara was trouble, and Langley was worse." Miss Marple nodded, her mind on the journal. It pointed to Dr. Haydock's father, but also to the Ashfords. She needed more time, more talk, to untangle the web. "Keep an eye on Laura," she said. "She's quieter than she seems." Craddock raised an eyebrow. "You know something, don't you?" She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Just an old lady's hunches, Inspector." But the journal burned in her mind, and Eleanor's secret held. Her tongue as night fell. St. Mary Mead grew quiet, its lanes dark under the stars. Miss Marple sat by her fire, the journal hidden in her knitting basket. Clara's words echoed. "I'll make them face the truth." Someone had killed to stop her. And now Langley. The letters were a warning, but Miss Marple wasn't afraid. She'd seen worse webs in her time. Tomorrow, she'd talk to Laura again, maybe Dr. Haydock too. She'd ask her gentle questions, the ones that slipped under the skin. The truth was close, tangled in secrets and lies. And Miss Marple, with her quiet heart and sharp eyes, would pull it free, one thread at a time. Chapter 6. The garden party trapped. The sun dipped low over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across the village. Fear clung to the air like damp fog, fed by Clara Henshaw's poisoning and Mr. Langley's brutal stabbing. Anonymous letters, with their sharp words like secrets cut deep, kept the village on edge. Miss Jane Marple sat in her parlor, her knitting untouched, Clara's journal hidden in her basket, its pages burned with truth. Clara was Eleanor's granddaughter, come to expose a betrayal tied to Dr. Haydock's father and the Ash. Miss Marple's promise to Eleanor, her friend from a long-ago summer in Italy, held her tongue. But to deaths meant the killer was desperate, and she knew she had to act. The journal was her key, but it wasn't enough. The killer hid among familiar faces, Laura Ashford's trembling hands, Thomas Ashford's cold stare, Dr. Haydock's nervous frown. The anonymous letters were their taunt, daring her to catch them. Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. She'd seen webs like this before, and she knew how to shake them. At breakfast, she visited Mrs. Bantry, whose stone house bustled with morning chores. Mrs. Bantry was polishing silver, her face flushed. "Jane, this village is falling apart," she said. "Another letter came today. The truth bleeds. Who's doing this?" Miss Marple sipped tea, her face calm. "Someone who wants us scared. But fear makes mistakes. What if we give them a chance to slip?" Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened. "A trap. Oh, Jane, you're clever. What's your plan?" "A garden party," Miss Marple said, her voice soft. "At your house. Tomorrow. Invite everyone. Laura, Thomas, Dr. Haydock, even the vicar. Say it's to lift spirits. I'll drop a hint about Clara's locket. See who flinches." Mrs. Bantry clapped her hands. "Brilliant. I'll make scones and lemonade. But be careful, Jane. This killer's dangerous." Miss Marple smiled, her needles clicking in her bag. "Dangerous, yes, but so was a quiet old lady with sharp eyes." By noon, the village buzzed with news of the party. Miss Marple walked to the vicarage, where Mrs. Clement was sorting hymnals. "A party's just what we need," Mrs. Clement said, but her voice shook. "Those letters, I got one this morning, saying, 'No one hides forever. It's awful. Miss Marple nodded, her mind on the journal. Clara had written about the locket, proving the truth Lenore's betrayal by Dr. Haydock's father. Maybe tied to old Mr. Ashford. Did Clara ever mention a locket to you? She asked, her tone light. Mrs. Clement frowned. No, but she asked about old scandals, like she knew something. Dr. Haydock got so cross when she brought up his father. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Dr. Haydock's father, the man who broke Eleanor's heart. Clara's journal confirmed it, but the locket was the proof. She needed to see who reacted to it. That afternoon, she stopped by the Ashford estate. Laura was in the garden, her hands dirty from weeding. She looked up, startled, as Miss Marple approached. "Oh, Miss Marple, I didn't hear you. I brought an invitation," Miss Marple said, handing her a note for the party. "And I wanted to ask, did Clara show you a locket? Old, with a photo inside." Laura's face paled, her fingers tightening on her trowel. "A locket? No, she never showed me anything." She turned away, clipping roses too fast. Miss Marple watched her, noting the tremble in her hands. Laura knew something, maybe about her father's past. The journal hinted at a child Eleanor lost to time. Was Laura that child's daughter? She thanked Laura and left, her mind spinning. The next day, Mrs. Bantry's garden bloomed with roses and laughter, but tension hung like a storm cloud. Tables were set with lace cloths, piled with scones, jam, and lemonade. Villagers mingled, their smiles forced. Laura Ashford stood by a hedge, her dress neat, but her eyes darting. Thomas lounged by the tea table, his face bored. Dr. Haydock poured lemonade, his hands steady but his jaw tight. Inspector Craddock was there too, watching everyone. Miss Marple moved through the crowd, her shawl loose over her shoulders. She stopped by the vicar, chatting about flowers, but her eyes tracked the suspects. At the right moment, she raised her voice just enough. "Such a shame about Clara's locket," she said to Mrs. Bantry, loud enough for others to hear. "Found in her cottage, with old Mr. Ashford's photo inside. It must mean something, don't you think?" Laura dropped her cup, the china shattering on the grass. Thomas froze, his eyes narrowing. Dr. Haydock spilled lemonade, his face red. Miss Marple's heart raced, but her face stayed calm. The trap was set. Mrs. Bantry, quick to play along, gasped, "A locket, with Mr. Ashford's photo. That's odd." The crowd murmured, heads turning. Laura bent to pick up her cup, her hands shaking. "I don't know anything about it," she said, too loud. Thomas pulled her aside, whispering fiercely. Dr. Haydock mopped his brow, avoiding Miss Marple's gaze. As the party went on, Miss Marple slipped to the edge of the garden, watching. She saw Laura slip a note into Thomas's hand, her face pale. Dr. Haydock hovered near the tea table, his eyes on the crowd. Then, a scream split the air. Mrs. Clement clutched her glass, her face white. "My lemonade tastes wrong." Miss Marple moved fast, knocking the glass from her hand. It fell to the grass, fizzing oddly. "Don't drink it," she said, her voice firm. Craddock rushed over, sniffing the spilled liquid. "Bitter almonds," he said, his eyes wide. "Cyanide, like Clara." The crowd gasped, backing away. Mrs. Clement swayed, but she was unharmed. Miss Marple's quick hand had saved her. Craddock barked orders, sealing the garden. "Nobody leaves," he said. "We're searching everyone." Miss Marple's mind raced. The killer was here, bold enough to strike again. She thought of the journal, hidden in her cottage. Clara had written about the locket and Dr. Haydock's father, but also Laura's panic, Thomas's debts, Dr. Haydock's nerves, they all fit. The anonymous letters were a distraction, but the poison was real. As Craddock questioned guests, Miss Marple pulled Mrs. Bantry aside. "Did you see who poured Mrs. Clement's lemonade?" she whispered. Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened. Dr. Haydock was at the table all afternoon, but Laura was nearby, and Thomas kept walking past. Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking in her bag. The trap had worked. Someone had panicked, tried to silence another voice. But who? She thought of Eleanor, betrayed by Dr. Haydock's father, maybe tied to old Mr. Ashford. The journal held the truth, but she needed one more piece. That evening, back at her cottage, Miss Marple read the journal again. Clara's words were clear. The locket proves he lied. Haydock's father ruined her, and the Ashfords covered it up. A new page caught her eye. Missed before. I told Langley. He wants the story for his book. He's greedy, but he'll help. That Miss Marple's breath caught. Langley knew Clara's plan. Had he tried to use it, maybe blackmail someone? That would explain the knife in his chest. The killer was tying up loose ends, and Mrs. Clement had nearly been next. The village clock struck 9. Its chime soft in the dark. Miss Marple tucked the journal away, her mind sharp. The garden party had shaken the web, and the killer was nervous. Laura's dropped cup, Thomas's whisper, Dr. Haydock's spilled lemonade. They were clues, pointing to the truth. She thought of Eleanor, her friend's tears in Italy, the man who broke her. That secret had stayed buried, but Clara had dug it up, and now blood followed. Tomorrow, Miss Marple would push harder. She'd talk to Craddock, maybe show him the journal, but not her letter from Clara. That was her burden, her promise. The killer was close, their steps faltering. She'd set one more trap, ask one more question, and the truth would spill like the lemonade on the grass dot as she blew out her candle. St. Mary Mead slept under the stars. But Miss Marple's eyes stayed open, seeing the web of lies and secrets. She'd untangle it, one quiet stitch at a time. Chapter 7. The Secret Revealed. The evening air in St. Mary Mead was heavy, as if the village held its breath. To death's Clara Henshaw's poisoning and Mr. Langley's stabbing had left everyone shaken. Anonymous letters, with their chilling words, like secrets cut deep, still haunted doorsteps. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cottage, the fire casting shadows on her face. Clara's journal lay open in her lap, its pages telling a story of betrayal and truth. Her letter from Clara, tucked in her pocket, burned with words about Italy and Eleanor. That secret, a promise kept for decades, was the key to it all. Tonight, Miss Marple would unravel the web. She'd spent the day thinking, her needle still but her mind racing. The garden party trap had worked. Laura Ashford's dropped cup, Thomas's sharp whisper, Dr. Haydock's spilled lemonade. Someone had tried to poison Mrs. Clement, and the bitter almond smell meant cyanide, just like Clara. The journal confirmed Clara was Eleanor's granddaughter, come to expose a lie tied to Dr. Haydock's father and the Ashfords. Miss Marple promised to Eleanor had kept her silent. But 2 deaths and a near miss meant it was time to speak. She called Inspector Craddock, her voice calm but firm. Gather everyone at the vicarage tonight, Inspector. Laura, Thomas, Dr. Haydock, Mrs. Bantry, Mrs. Clement. I've found something, and it's time to settle this. Craddock hesitated. You've got a theory, Miss Marple, about the killer. More than a theory, she said, her eyes sharp. Bring the locket and Clara's diary. 7 o'clock, please. The vicarage glowed with lamplight as the village clock struck 7. The parlor was crowded, the air thick with tension. Laura Ashford sat by the window, her hands twisted in her lap. Thomas leaned against the wall, his face hard. Dr. Haydock stood near the fire, his fingers tapping nervously. Mrs. Bantry and Mrs. Clement sat on the sofa, whispering. Craddock stood by the door, his notebook ready. Miss Marple entered, her shawl neat, her face gentle but her eyes like steel. She carried Clara's journal, its leather cover worn. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice soft. Clara Henshaw and Mr. Langley are dead, and Mrs. Clement nearly joined them. It's time for the truth. The room went quiet, all eyes on her. Laura's breath caught, and Dr. Haydock's face paled. Miss Marple held up the journal. Clara came to St. Mary Mead with a purpose. She was chasing a story from long ago about a woman named Eleanor. This journal tells it. She opened the journal, reading aloud. My grandmother, Eleanor, loved a man who lied. He was a doctor, Haydock's father. He broke her heart, and the Ashfords hid it. The locket proves it. Gasps filled the room. Laura clutched her chair, and Dr. Haydock's hands shook. Miss Marple turned to Craddock. Show them the locket, Inspector. He held it up, its photo of old Mr. Ashford glinting. Found in Clara's cottage, he said. Why was it there? Miss Marple's eyes swept the room. Clara was Eleanor's granddaughter. She came to expose a betrayal. Eleanor loved a man in Italy. Years ago, when I was young, I was her friend, and I saw her pain. Her voice softened, but her gaze stayed sharp. That man was Dr. Haydock's father, Richard Haydock. He promised her love, then left her for another. The Ashfords, tied to him by marriage, kept it quiet, to save their name. Dr. Haydock stood, his face red. That's a lie. My father was a good man. Miss Marple raised a hand. Clara thought otherwise. She had Eleanor's letters proving it. And this locket, with Mr. Ashford's photo, tied her to his family. She came to make them face it. Laura's voice broke. My father had nothing to do with this. He's dead. Miss Marple nodded, but his secrets live. Clara asked questions at the tea party. To you, to Dr. Haydock, to Langley. Someone feared her truth. She turned to Craddock. The anonymous letters, truth kills, secrets cut deep, were meant to scare us, to point fingers, everywhere. But they came from the killer. Thomas snorted. You're saying one of us wrote them. That's mad. Miss Marple's eyes locked on him. Not mad, Thomas. Desperate. Clara told Langley her story, hoping he'd publish it. He saw money, and it may be blackmail. That's why he died. Mrs. Bantry gasped. Blackmail. Langley. Yes, Miss Marple said. The note on his body, secrets cut deep, was a warning. And the cyanide in Mrs. Clement's lemonade was meant to silence anyone else who knew too much. Mrs. Clement clutched her throat. But why me? Miss Marple's voice was gentle. You overheard Clara at the tea party, talking about old scandals. The killer thought you knew more than you did. Craddock stepped forward. So who's the killer? Miss Marple, you've got the journal, the locket. Tell us. She took a breath, her eyes on Dr. Haydock. Dr. Haydock, you poured the lemonade at the party. You were at the tea table when Mrs. Clement's glass was poisoned, and you were angry when Clara asked about your father. He stumbled back, his face white. You think I killed her? I'm a doctor, I save lives. Miss Marple's voice stayed calm. Your father, Richard, broke Eleanor's heart. She was my friend, and I promised to keep her secret. Clara found letters proving it, and she came here to expose him. You couldn't let that happen. Your family's name, your pride, was too much. Dr. Haydock shook his head. No, I argued with her. Yes, but I didn't kill her. Miss Marple turned to the journal, reading again. Haydock knows, but he won't talk. The locket will make him. Clara confronted you, didn't she? You slipped cyanide into her tea at Rose Cottage, quick and quiet. You knew where to get it to her office, as chemicals. Laura sobbed, and Thomas clenched his fists. Miss Marple continued, her voice steady. Langley was next. He knew Clara's story, and tried to use it. You stabbed him, pinned that note to his chest to throw us off. And the anonymous letters you wrote them, pointing at Laura and Thomas, making us chase shadows. Dr. Haydock's face crumpled. You can't prove it. Craddock held up to a folded paper. We found this in your office today, a draft of an anonymous letter. Same handwriting. And a vial of cyanide, hidden in your desk. The room froze. Dr. Haydock sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I didn't mean to. Clara wouldn't stop. She'd ruin my father's name. My name. Langley was worse. He wanted money. I had to stop them. Laura cried out. You killed her. For what? Old stories. Miss Marple's eyes softened. For pride, Laura, and fear. But the truth always comes out. She turned to Craddock. I kept a secret to Eleanor's story. I saw her pain in Italy, caused by his father. Clara's letter to me said she knew, but I waited to be sure. I'm sorry it took so long. Craddock nodded, his face grim. You've done enough, Miss Marple. We'll take it from here. He signaled to officers, who led Dr. Haydock away. His shoulders slumped. The room buzzed with whispers as the crowd dispersed. Mrs. Bantry hugged Miss Marple, her eyes wet. You're a wonder, Jane. But you carried that secret alone. Why? Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft. A promise to a friend, Dolly. Some secrets are worth keeping, until they're not. Outside, the stars shone over St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple walked home, her steps light. The village would heal, and Clara's truth was free. Eleanor's ghost could rest now, her story told. Miss Marple's secret had been her guide, and her quiet heart had won. Chapter 8. Justice and Reflection. The morning sun rose gently over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft pinks and golds. The air felt lighter, as if the shadows of Clara Henshaw's poisoning and Mr. Langley's stabbing had begun to fade. Dr. Haydock's arrest the night before had spread through the village like wildfire, leaving whispers of shock and relief. Miss Jane Marple sat in her garden, pruning her roses, her knitting basket at her feet. Clara's letter, now tucked safely in a drawer, no longer weighed on her heart. Her secret about Eleanor, her friend's heartbreak in Italy, tied to Dr. Haydock's father had been revealed, but only as much as needed. The village was healing, and Miss Marple's quiet work was done. The roses bloomed brightly, their petals catching the light. Miss Marple snipped a wilted bud, her hand steady but her mind wandering. Clara had come to St. Mary Mead, chasing truth. Her grandmother, Eleanor's story of betrayal by Richard Haydock, a charming doctor who left her broken. The locket with old Mr. Ashford's photo had tied it to the Ashfords who hid the scandal to save their name. Dr. Haydock, desperate to protect his father's memory, had poisoned Clara and stabbed Langley, then sent anonymous letters to scare the village. Miss Marple's trap at the garden party, her hint about the locket had shaken him, and his attempt to poison Mrs. Clement had sealed his guilt. She sighed, thinking of Eleanor's face, so like Clara's. As a young woman in Italy, Miss Marple had seen Eleanor's tears, heard her vow to keep her pain secret. Miss Marple had promised to stay silent, and she had, until Clara's death forced her hand. The journal, found under the roses, and Clara's letter had been the keys, but her own memories had guided her. She'd told only what was needed, keeping Eleanor's deepest hurts private. Some secrets, she knew, were better left buried. A knock at her gate broke her thoughts. Mrs. Bantry stood there, her hat slightly crooked, her face a mix of awe and worry. "Jane, you're a marvel," she said, stepping into the garden. "Dr. Haydock, of all people, I still can't believe it. How did you know?" Miss Marple smiled, offering a chair under the apple tree. "Oh, Dolly, it's just watching and listening. People tell you more than they mean to, if you let them." Mrs. Bantry sat, fanning herself. "But those letters, truth kills. Secrets cut deep. They had us all jumping at shadows. And the cyanide in Clara's tea. Then Mrs. Clement's lemonade. He was so ordinary. A doctor. Ordinary people have the deepest secrets," Miss Marple said, her voice soft. "Dr. Haydock loved his father's memory. Clara's questions threatened that, and Langley's greed made it worse. He thought killing would keep it buried." Mrs. Bantry shivered. "And Laura Ashford. She was so scared at the party, dropping her cup when you mentioned the locket." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes on a rose. "Laura knew something, maybe her father's role in hiding Eleanor's shame. But she's no killer. She was frightened, that's all." As they spoke, Laura Ashford herself appeared at the gate, her face pale but calmer than before. She carried a small bouquet of daisies, her hand steady now. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice quiet, "may I come in?" "Of course, dear," Miss Marple said, rising. "Join us." Laura sat, clutching the daisies. "I wanted to thank you and to apologize. I knew Clara was asking about father, about some old trouble. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed." Miss Marple's eyes softened. "No need for shame, Laura. Your father was young once, and young people make mistakes. Clara wanted justice for her grandmother, but it's over now." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "I found old letters in our attic after you spoke last night. They were from a woman named Eleanor to my father. She loved someone else, but father helped her leave the village when she was in trouble. He never told anyone." Miss Marple's heart ached. So old Mr. Ashford had been kind, not cruel. Eleanor's letters must have been the ones Clara found, leading her here. "You've done right to tell me," she said. "It clears his name." Laura smiled, a weight lifted. "Thomas is sorry too. He was angry with Langley over money, but he'd never hurt anyone. We want to help the village now. Maybe start a fund in Clara's name." Mrs. Bantry clapped her hands. "What a lovely idea. Jane, you've set everything right." Miss Marple shook her head, her smile gentle. "I only pulled the thread, Dolly. The village did the rest." After Laura left, Mrs. Bantry stayed, sipping tea Miss Marple brought from the house. The garden hummed with bees, and the air smelled of roses and earth. "You carried that secret about Eleanor a long time," Mrs. Bantry said. "It must have been heavy." Miss Marple's needles clicked, starting a new scarf. "It was. Eleanor was my friend, and I saw her heart break in Italy. Richard Haydock promised her love, then left her for another. She made me swear not to tell, and I kept that promise until Clara's death forced my hand." Mrs. Bantry leaned close. "But why keep it after all these years? You could have told Craddock sooner." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Some secrets protect people, Dolly. Eleanor wanted her pain forgotten. Clara changed that, but I told only what was needed. The rest is hers, even now." Mrs. Bantry nodded, her face soft. "You're kinder than you let on, Jane." As the sun climbed higher, Inspector Craddock arrived, his hat in hand. "Miss Marple, you've outdone yourself," he said, sitting on the garden bench. "Dr. Haydock's confessed. Cyanide from his office for Clara, a knife from his kitchen for Langley. The letters were his, to throw us off. He's broken, says he couldn't let his father's name be ruined." Miss Marple nodded, her face calm. "Pride is a heavy thing, Inspector. It drove him to terrible choices." Craddock flipped his notebook shut. "We found Clara's grandmother's letters in Haydock's desk. They matched the journal Eleanor's story, her heartbreak. You were right about it all. But how did you know?" She smiled, her needles moving, an old lady's hunches, and a bit of listening. "Clara's letter to me helped, but I waited to be sure." Craddock raised an eyebrow. "You held back that letter. Nearly gave me a heart attack." Miss Marple chuckled. "I had to be certain, Inspector. A promise is a promise." He shook his head, grinning. "You're a marvel, Miss Marple. The village owes you." As Craddock left, the village settled into its old rhythm. Children played on the green, their laughter bright. Mrs. Price swept her shop steps, gossiping about the weather now, not murder. The anonymous letters stopped, their venom gone with Dr. Haydock. St. Mary Mead was itself again, cozy and quiet, its secrets laid to rest. That evening, Miss Marple sat by her fire, knitting the pink scarf. Her nephew, Raymond West, would visit soon, eager for her story. She'd tell him some of it: Clara's quest, the locket, the journal, but not all. Eleanor's deepest pain, her tears under Italian stars, would stay with Miss Marple. Some truths didn't need telling. She thought of Clara, so like Eleanor, brave and bold. Her death had been a tragedy, but it had brought justice. Langley's greed had cost him, and Dr. Haydock's pride had broken him. Laura and Thomas would heal, their family's name clear. The village would move on, its heart strong. Miss Marple set her knitting down, her eyes on the fire. Secrets were like roses, beautiful, but sharp with thorns. She'd carried Eleanor's for years, and it had guided her to the truth. Now, it could rest, like the village under the stars. The clock struck 9, its chime soft in the quiet night. Miss Marple blew out her candle and climbed the stairs, her steps light. St. Mary Mead was safe, its shadows gone, but she knew, with her sharp eyes and quiet heart, that other mysteries would come. And when they did, she'd be ready, knitting, by her window, watching the world.